She was kicked out of her house by her stepmother just moments after her father's funeral, accused of being greedy when all she carried was grief. But in her despair, a wealthy stranger would soon appear, offering a hand. From that moment, her father's secret letter, a hidden blue notebook, and a cold-blooded truth would slowly begin to come to light. The morning dew clung to the grass outside the funeral home, the air thick with lilies and weak coffee. Emily Reed clutched a photo of her father, David, her eyes hollow. Clara Jenkins, the housekeeper, whispered, "He loved you." Then Sarah Reed, the second wife, swept in. Her designer dress was immaculate, her makeup perfect. She wasn't grieving. She was performing. "Thank you for coming," she announced to the room. "One journey ends, another begins," Emily flinched. She had no idea that in a few short hours this woman wouldn't just be burying her husband. She'd be trying to bury his daughter, too. "What city are you watching this video from, and what time is it?" By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. The funeral ceremony was mercifully brief. Sarah orchestrated it all, standing front and center, accepting condolences with a practiced, somber grace. Emily stood numbly, the photo frame digging into her palms. When the last guest had filed out, Sarah clapped her hands together, a soft, managerial sound that cut through the silence. "This afternoon," she announced to the remaining few, her voice smooth, "we will have a remembrance gathering back at the house." David would have wanted people to smile. A silence stretched. A colleague looked at Emily, searching for a sign. Emily just stared at her father's portrait, the frame feeling heavier than lead. "At 4:00, Sarah continued, smiling. "Clara, everything is ready, correct?" Clara Jenkins, who had been a quiet pillar by Emily's side, gave a stiff nod. As they left, Sarah's daughter from her first marriage, Madison, ran circles on the lawn, her new dress a cloud of white lace. "Look, Mommy," she squealed, holding up a bright plastic toy. Sarah bent, fixed her daughter's bow, and whispered something that made Madison giggle. By 4 p.m., the Reed family home was unrecognizable. A smooth jazz playlist drifted from a Bluetooth speaker. The long dining room table was laden not with comfort food, but with trays of delicate pastries, mini quiches, and red plastic cups filled with wine. Neighbors and colleagues lingered awkwardly on the threshold, unsure of the tone. Sarah threw her arms open. "We can't spend our lives weeping. If they're in heaven, they wouldn't want us to be miserable." Emily was in the corner of the kitchen, holding a silver tray. Clara had just placed a hand on her shoulder when Sarah's voice cut through the chatter. "Emily, take this tray out to our guests." Sarah didn't even turn her head. Emily nodded, her hands shaking as she carried the platter of finger sandwiches through the crowd. Meanwhile, Madison twirled through the room in her party dress. "What a beautiful girl," a neighbor cooed, patting her head. Clara followed Emily, discreetly lifting part of the tray's weight. "Let me help." "I can do it," Emily whispered, setting the tray down. Her eyes drifted to the worn armchair where David used to read the paper. The conversations buzzed around her, topics of gas prices, new contracts, and school districts, as if grief hadn't touched this house just that morning. Sarah moved fluidly through the crowd, raising her glass. A thin colleague of David's looked around and asked, "So, I assume this beautiful house goes to Emily, right?" David always said. The conversation stopped. The air thinned. Sarah's smile turned icy. "Everything is clearly outlined in the will." Emily froze, halfway to picking up an empty cup. Clara raised her eyebrows. "In fact," Sarah said, clapping her hands twice, "so that everyone understands, we'll read the will now." The music volume was lowered. The rustle of paper filled the air. Sarah stood by the old piano and read slowly, her voice confident, emphasizing legal phrases and figures. The entire inheritance, the house, the savings, the car, belonged to Sarah and her daughter Madison. A few surprised gasps. Someone started to clap, then stopped, confused. Emily felt the floor tilt. Her gaze flew to her father's photo on the mantel. The room felt tight, her throat sandpaper dry. But Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I just want to keep Dad's old teddy bear." She looked at the worn brown bear on the wooden shelf, its ears flopped over. Sarah moved fast, snatching the bear from the shelf. "Ambitious," she spat, the word a slap. "Even with your father barely cold." Clara stepped forward. "Sarah." "This is a family matter, Clara," Sarah cut her off, then turned back to Emily, her eyes glittering. "The will is clear. Everything is included. No exceptions. It's just—" Emily's hand was half open, reaching for the last thing that still held the faint scent of her father's shampoo. "It is property," Sarah said, the words like a locking mechanism. She straightened her shoulders and pointed to the front door. Her voice, stripped of all hospitality, was chilling. "Get out of this house. As of today, you have no place here." "Today?" Clara moved to block the path. "You can't." "Today is the day I put everything in order," Sarah said, her eyes fixed on Emily, waiting. Emily stood motionless for a second. She placed the tray she was holding gently on the table. She looked around at the house she knew, the scratch on the table leg she'd made at 14, the scent of wood polish from the kitchen cabinets. It was all slipping through her fingers like water. She bent, picked up her old sandals by the mat, and slipped them on. Clara touched her elbow, but Emily shook her head. She walked out between faces that turned away or ducked toward their drinks. The porch air was cold. In the street, the shadows of the trees were stretching long. Emily walked slowly, her old sandals scraping against the cement. Behind her, the bright jazz music started up again, and the clinking of glasses. She didn't look back. She ended up on a concrete step next to a recycling bin, blocks away from the house. Her stomach growled, a sharp cramping pain. In her hands, she clutched the old teddy bear. Clara had thrust it into her arms just as she stepped off the porch, before disappearing back into the noisy house. Passers-by avoided her gaze. A group of college kids laughed, smelling of cinnamon, and glanced at her before heading to the parking lot. A delivery guy on an e-bike splashed water from a puddle onto her pants. "My bad," he said, and kept pedaling. Emily pressed the bear to her stomach and looked up at the menu taped inside the glass of the corner diner. Meatloaf, chicken pot pie, blueberry pie. She swallowed hard. "A piece of pie," she whispered to herself. The traffic light changed. Across the street, a group of men in suits exited an Italian restaurant shaking hands. The last one to leave, a man in a crisp shirt, closed his briefcase, looked up, and froze. He saw her, a thin girl on the wet curb, cast in the red glow of the neon sign. He loosened his tie, crossed the street, and crouched down just enough to meet her eyes. His voice was low, just louder than the city hum. "Have you eaten?" Emily instinctively recoiled. "I haven't eaten," she said, the truth simple and flat. "I don't have a home anymore." The man nodded slightly. "I'm Rick Martinez. I run the auto shop on the corner." He tilted his head toward a row of industrial garages. "Do you want to get something to eat with me? In there?" "I'm fine," she said, but her throat ached. Rick didn't argue. He pulled a pack of tissues from his pocket and slid it onto the step near her. "You don't have to tell me anything. I just want you to be a little less hungry, a little less cold." She looked at the tissues, then at his large hand. "I'm scared," Emily whispered. "I know," Rick replied, his voice calm as wet asphalt. "Fear is normal. Look, there are plenty of people around. We can sit at the table right by the window where everyone can see us. They have good blueberry pie, and the chicken soup heats up fast. I'm buying. No strings attached." Emily hesitated, looking through the steam-fogged glass at the counter, the server, the clatter of plates. "If I come in, will you call someone?" "Only if you want me to," Rick said. "And if you feel up to it after you eat, I know a safe place you can spend the night. It's not far. The doors lock." He extended his hand unhurried. "So, if you accept, come have dinner with me." Emily looked at his hand. She nodded just barely and slowly placed her own in his. His palm was warmer than she expected. He helped her up. Her stomach growled again and she blushed. He pretended not to hear, pushing the diner door open. "We'll get something easy to eat. Then I'll take you to the safe place." Martinez Auto Repair was at the end of a row of old warehouses. Inside, white fluorescent lights hummed over a grease-stained concrete floor. A small space heater buzzed softly. Emily sat on a swivel chair with a broken back, holding a mug of hot chicken broth Rick had heated in the microwave. Each sip was a warm thread, untangling the knot of hunger. Rick hung his jacket on a hook, rolled up his sleeves, and gestured to the cars. This '99 Ford? Slow starter, dirty air filter, but the chassis is solid. That Chevy truck? The old owner tightened the bolts too much and stripped the threads. He spoke as if introducing old friends. Emily watched him, tired but attentive. "I know hunger," Rick said, leaning against a workbench. "When I was about your age, I was clinging to a soup mug just like that. Slept in gas stations. One day, an old mechanic saw me, gave me a rag, and put me to work cleaning parts. He never asked who I was. Just said, 'Work, don't talk.' He taught me how to listen to an engine. When he passed, I promised I'd do the same for someone else when the time came. He picked up an old spark plug. So, if you need a roof for a few days, there's a spare room back here. It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe." Emily took another sip. "The bathroom is down the hall," Rick said gently. "Nobody will touch your things." She laid her head down on her backpack, her eyes closing. Rick dimmed the main lights, leaving just one yellow lamp on over the desk. He sat and opened a ledger, writing, but glancing over occasionally. Around 10 p.m., a soft knock tapped on the metal roll door. Rick looked up, went to the door, and lifted it halfway. The streetlight spilled in. Clara Jenkins stood there, wrapped in an old wool scarf, her breath white. "Is she here?" she whispered, spotting Emily. "I'm okay," Emily said, her voice thick with sleep. Clara rushed in, pulling a crumpled yellow envelope from her coat. "I found this in your father's old desk," she whispered, pressing it into Emily's hands. "I can't keep it. They've already started going through everything. Don't read it where people can see." Emily's heart hammered. She opened the flap. The paper smelled of old files and David's faint mint shampoo. "Emily, my girl, if you're reading this, something happened. I love you, even if I was never good at saying it. In the workshop, in the bottom drawer of the red toolbox, there is a blue notebook. Keep it safe. If you need help, find Mr. Herrera at Herrera & Sons on Hidalgo Street. He knows what I did and why. Don't believe in easy promises. Be strong, my girl. I will always love you." Dad Emily read the words, her lips moving. The blue notebook, Mr. Herrera. The dam she had built all day finally broke. She doubled over, a single heavy sob escaping. Rick sat beside her, not touching the letter, just giving her space. "Emily," he said quietly, "when you're ready, we'll figure this out. Together." Clara gripped her shoulder. "I have to go. They think I'm taking out the trash." She looked at Rick. Herrera was David's old friend. A good man. She quickly vanished back into the night. Emily clutched the letter. The short sentences were like turning on a lamp in a dark room. She looked up, her eyes red but anchored. "Tomorrow," Rick said, standing to refill her mug. "If you want, we'll go find that notebook." The morning light was gray as Rick drove his old truck, the radio murmuring traffic reports. Emily sat in the passenger seat clutching her bear. Clara was in the back. As they pulled into the alley beside the Reed house, the workshop stood separate, its brick walls damp. A new, shiny padlock was on the door. Sarah was waiting in the yard, arms crossed, her black coat tailored. "Lost," she smirked. "Everything here belongs to me. Don't even think about it." Rick stepped forward. "We just want to get a few personal items." "The will has been read," Sarah said, her smile like a razor. "There is no personal property except what I allow." Rick calmly guided Emily back. "We're leaving," he said, loud enough for all three to hear. On the sidewalk, Clara leaned in. "David used to give a spare key to Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor, in case the pipes ever burst. I remember he said he kept it behind the washer. Maybe she still has it." Rick nodded toward the corner house, bright with yellow chrysanthemums. "Let's find out." Mrs. Rosa Peterson, a small woman with silver hair and flour on her hands, opened the door. "Clara, oh Emily." Her gaze softened. Rick introduced himself. "We need to get into David's workshop. We have good reason." Mrs. Peterson ushered them into her kitchen. "Sarah came by last week," she said, her voice slow, remembering. "Asked for pliers and tape. said she was organizing papers. Then, the night before the funeral, I saw her at the Copy King on Juarez Street, at the self-serve machine for a long time. When she came back, she burned something in her backyard grill. The smoke smelled like plastic. She looked at Emily. I still have the old key. David asked me to keep it. She retrieved a flat, scratched key from a tin box and pressed it into Rick's hand. I'll go with you. If she says anything, I'll say I was checking the pipes. They returned to the quiet alley. The key slid into the old lock with a soft click. The door creaked open. Inside, it smelled of metal and dust. Shelves were laden with jars of screws and bottles of oil. In the corner was the red toolbox. Emily knelt. Bottom drawer, red box, she whispered. Rick shined his phone's flashlight. Emily pulled the bottom drawer. It squeaked. And there, under a set of wrenches, was a blue notebook with a rubber band around it. Her fingers trembled. She opened the first page. David's heavy, sure handwriting. Tucked inside was a sealed envelope with Herrera written on it. Emily turned a few pages, repair jobs, client lists. Then, a page clipped with a yellow sticky note titled Personal Will. She read slowly. The house was for Emily to use and live in until she reached the age of majority. Clara Jenkins was to be the guardian of the property and her legal representative. Any transfer or loan against the property was invalid without the joint signature of Clara and Emily after she turned 18. At the bottom, David had signed and dated it. There were 2 witnesses, Mr. Herrera and Rosa Peterson. Mrs. Peterson gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I signed that last year. He came over late and said, Rosa, just witness this for me. I read it. It made sense. Clara sagged against a shelf. Then what Sarah read was another version, Rick said, his voice flat steel. He pointed to the envelope. Let's go see Herrera. Emily hugged the notebook. For the first time in days, a small light was shining in her eyes. Mr. Herrera's office was on the 2nd floor of an old white house. He was a man with silver hair and a straight back. Emily placed the blue notebook on his dark wooden desk. Herrera put on his glasses, read the personal will, and then pulled an old file from a drawer. He compared the signature on the notebook to a loan application David had signed the year before. He nodded slowly. This is David's hand. The pressure, the way he underlines, the way he always crosses his 7s. The date here, 2 days before he was hospitalized. He checked a calendar. This is proof of genuine intent. In probate court, this will have significant weight, especially with witness signatures. Mrs. Peterson then told her story. The night before the funeral, I saw Sarah at the Copy King on Juarez Street, and I smelled plastic burning from her grill. Herrera leaned forward. Copy King keeps transaction records. There must be a receipt with a timestamp. Rick pulled out his cell phone. I know the manager there. Mike, let me try. He stepped onto the porch. He returned a moment later. Mike's working. He can't release records, but he'll show us the receipt if the job was paid for with Sarah's card. I'll go too, Herrera said. At the print shop, the air smelled of paper and toner. Mike, in a plaid shirt, shook Rick's hand and pulled up the computer log. He located the transaction and showed the slim receipt to Herrera over the counter. Client, Sarah Reed. 10:04 p.m. 148 pages. Black and white hard stock cover. Herrera jotted the transaction number and time on a yellow legal pad. When was David admitted to the hospital? Clara checked her old text messages. That afternoon. 3:17 p.m. Emergency observation. Herrera put the pieces together. So, at 10 p.m. that night, David was in the hospital. He could not have written or photocopied the will Sarah presented. Just then, Clara's phone buzzed. Sarah flashed on the screen. Clara looked at the others, answered, and put it on speaker. Sarah's voice was sharp. What are you doing with them? If you betray me, you will regret it. This is Mr. Herrera, Mrs. Reed's attorney. Herrera's voice boomed. All future communication must go through me. Do not harass the witnesses. Every threat from now on will be registered. There was a 2-second silence. Sarah hung up. We're not done, Herrera said. We need to preserve this evidence. Rick, does your shop have security cameras? Ones that might face the street? Yes, Rick said. They overlook the street and the Copy King parking lot. We need that footage. Back at Martinez Auto Repair, Rick pulled up the camera feed for the night in question. They gathered around the monitors. The timestamp read 9:58 p.m. A black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The driver's door opened. Sarah Reed got out, carrying a thick sheaf of papers in a black folder. She looked around, then hurried into the Copy King. Emily watched, silent, the screen reflected in her eyes. At 10:48 p.m., Sarah reappeared. She got in her car and drove away. "That's proof," Emily whispered. "Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment about this story and rate it from 1 to 10. How are you feeling? If there's anything you'd like to share, I'm always here to listen. I hope you find a moment of peace and reflection as you follow this healing story and its journey of courage and justice." "Copy the entire segment," Herrera instructed, holding a portable hard drive. As they waited for the file to transfer, a man in a navy blue suit entered the shop. "Mr. Martinez?" His voice was smooth. "I'm Peter Vargas. I represent Mrs. Sarah Reed," he smiled. "My client is concerned that private matters are being exaggerated. If you were willing to look the other way, we could discuss fair compensation for your valuable time." Rick didn't stand. He looked him flat in the eye. "My time isn't for sale, and neither is the truth. Do you have a warrant?" "No," Vargas said. "Then you're trespassing," Rick said. "Any further contact goes through Mr. Herrera." Vargas left his card on the table and walked out. That night, the auto shop was dark. Devin, the night guard, was making his rounds. At 1:23 a.m., a motion sensor light clicked on by the side door. Devin frowned, shining his flashlight. A hooded figure was kneeling at the lock, a tool in hand. The door gave way. The figure slipped inside. Devin hit the silent alarm and moved down the hall. The hooded woman was heading straight for the server room, where the camera footage was stored. Devin stepped out, flashlight raised. "Stop!" The woman spun around, blinded. The light hit her face. It was Sarah. She fumbled, hiding the tools in her pocket, forcing a smile. I was looking for the bathroom." "The bathroom is the other way," Devin said, his hand on his radio. 2 minutes later, a patrol car rolled into the lot. The officers identified her, took notes, and filed a report. Illegal entry. No arrest, as nothing was damaged, but a written warning was filed. Herrera arrived while the police were still there, collected a copy of the report, and added it to the growing file. When Emily arrived in the morning, the yellow caution tape was still on the door. Rick pointed to the safe. "The footage is secure." Emily finally exhaled, a knot she didn't know she was holding unraveling. She turned and hugged Rick tightly. "I'm not afraid of her anymore," she whispered. The county probate courtroom was small, paneled in dark wood. The benches were filled with neighbors. Mrs. Peterson, the gray-haired colleague from the funeral, Clara, and Rick Sarah walked in as if stepping onto a stage, wearing a black suit, a cold necklace gleaming. Her lawyer, Peter Vargas, set a thick binder on the table. The judge, a no-nonsense man with rimless glasses, struck his gavel. "The matter before this court is the estate of David Reed." Sarah spoke first, her hand on her file. "Your Honor, this will is valid. I am only fulfilling my husband's wishes for peace and stability." Mr. Herrera stood, calm. "Your Honor, we present the following evidence." He laid out each piece. First, the blue notebook, handwritten by David Reed, dated 2 days before his hospitalization. It clearly states his personal wishes, the house to be maintained for Emily, with Mrs. Clara Jenkins as temporary guardian. Second, a letter from Mr. Reed to his daughter, directing her to this notebook and to me. Third, a receipt from Copy King, dated 10:04 p.m. the night before the funeral, paid by Sarah Reed's credit card for 148 pages. Fourth, security footage from Martinez Auto Repair, showing Mrs. Reed entering the Copy King at that time and leaving 45 minutes later with a bulky folder. The monitor in the courtroom flickered, showing the silent, damning footage. Fifth, Herrera continued, signature samples from Mr. Reed, compared to the document Mrs. Reed presented. They do not match. The personal will in the notebook, however, is a perfect match, and witnessed. And sixth, Herrera paused. Last night, Mrs. Reed illegally entered Martinez Auto Repair in an attempt to access the server room containing this footage. This is the police report from the incident. Sarah's face was immobile. Documents can be faked, she said. Videos can be manipulated. The judge looked at Sarah. Do you have the original will that you read at the funeral, Mrs. Reed? Vargas looked at his client. Sarah's lips thinned. I only have a copy. The original was lost in the arrangements. The judge leaned back. This court finds a substantial conflict. The personal will is backed by witness testimony and the decedent's own letter. The receipt and the video footage cast severe doubt on the origin of the will presented by Mrs. Reed. And the police report from last night suggests consciousness of guilt. He struck the gavel. This court orders the suspension of the will presented by Sarah Reed. I am issuing a preservation order for the estate and referring this case to the district attorney's office to investigate possible forgery. In the meantime, residential rights to the house are granted to Emily Reed, as per the handwritten wishes. Mrs. Clara Jenkins is appointed temporary guardian. A murmur rose from the benches. Emily sat down, her fingers gripping the wooden seat. Sarah leaped from her chair, scraping it across the floor. This is a farce. You're all in on it. You, bailiff, the judge ordered. 2 guards took Sarah's arms. Her eyes, burning with hatred, locked on Emily. I will. The threat was cut off as the doors closed behind her. Mr. Herrera packed his briefcase. Rick leaned in close to Emily. It's resolved. She looked up, her eyes shining with something more than relief. It was the feeling of an anchor catching. That afternoon, 2 county patrol cars pulled up to the house. The neighbors gathered at a distance, watching in silence. The front door opened and Sarah appeared, pulling a rolling suitcase. Mrs. Sarah Reed, an officer said, his voice clear. You are under arrest for suspicion of document forgery and evidence tampering. You have the right to remain silent. Sarah froze, her eyes scanning the faces of the neighbors. Her gaze landed on Emily, standing by Rick's truck. A flicker of something crossed Sarah's face before it was replaced by defiance. She extended her wrists. The handcuffs clicked shut. Rick placed a large, firm hand on Emily's shoulder. The patrol cars pulled away, their blue and red lights disappearing around the corner. 1 month later, the house on Juarez Street had changed. The grass was cut, the porch steps repainted. In the living room, David's photo hung straight. Emily slung her backpack onto a chair, placing her teddy bear on the shelf. Clara, who now lived with her, set a bowl of oatmeal on the table. Eat, you'll need strength, Emily smiled. I'm going to school, Aunt Clara. That afternoon, Emily went to Rick's shop. A new sign hung by the gate. The David Reed Fund for Children, offering subsidized repairs for single-parent families, and a small after-school art program. Emily sat at a wooden table with neighborhood kids, guiding them as they drew trees. Rick passed by, dropping off a jug of water, and went back to fixing a transmission. Emily's 18th birthday arrived quietly. Clara baked a chocolate cake. Mrs. Peterson brought yellow chrysanthemums. Rick placed a wooden frame on the picnic table in the backyard. Inside, protected by glass, was David's letter. Emily stood there for a long time before lighting the candles. She touched the frame. I'm okay, Dad, she whispered. Rick sat on a low stool beside her. You're safe now, he said, his voice as firm as the evening air. Emily took a deep breath and blew out the flames. The smoke rose, dissolving into the glow of the string lights above. In the framed letter, David's strong handwriting seemed new. Don't believe in easy promises. Emily smiled, as if answering an old conversation. I know, Dad, she whispered. She looked at Clara and Rick sitting on the porch steps, talking quietly. She was home.